with INDESEM, as you know, and I think it's very good that you again do it exactly at this moment in time. The sympathize it because of my background. As a kid I did it as well, and a couple of years ago I tried to help some of you as well to redo it in a new manner, and the book is coming out soon. It always takes 2 years to make the book afterwards. I think it's good because it has history and therefore say position, and we should take it even more, and especially at the moment that we just entered this building after a year that didn't cost a building. I'm not mean the whole old building, that's fine that it dropped, but actually it cost 1 year of intelligence. I mean, the new building will cost maybe 30 or 40 million in total, but all our salaries and all the scientific say cost that we have in this 1 year of loss is more than 40 to 45 million already. So, and that's what I feel strongly, that although I started a year ago, just a week before the collapse, exactly say at 7th of May, and that I'm only confronted up till now with disasters. A tower that collapsed, a dean that gets a virus, the next dean that is losing almost his closest friend and wife, and that makes that we should find and regain energy radically and dramatically this year. So thanks for all the guests that are here, that in a way help to raise that energy and to give this energy content, because that's what we're here for. I'm happy that I'm speaking together with Enrique today as well, good friend, and maybe the opposite of me in a way today. And I would like to contribute to your theme. I decided not to discuss Grand Paris, Greater Paris today with you, although it's on my lips, and although everyone wants to know the story, and I will do it soon here in the Netherlands or here in Delft. But you asked me, your organization asked me to talk on this, on the user. And I think they challenged me in the part, because with some of their posters. So, this is what you asked me. How do you design for experience, or a experience? And I will misuse this question the coming hour. Should it be focused on the user? The most stupid question I've ever heard in my life, because everything is user-friendly, everything is user-oriented. Whatever you do, even what Zaha is doing, is user-oriented, because she only wants to have clients and get more money and get more attention. So it is about users. Yeah, so do you start from the user from the very beginning? Again, it is so much based on, and that I think is very Dutch, that we look back to when in the 90s some of us become known or even famous. Then at that moment we're always very skeptical in this culture in the Netherlands. We look to it as if, say, we immediately are misusing what we are doing. Welcome, come in, just no problem. And that I find it understanding that you do it as an organization. It's good that you do it, but what I want to do is to give it a twist. And the last question that you gave to me is a much more promising direction. And I think Enrique will talk about that later as well, and I will do that as well. The best thing I can say to you now is, in a way, to look back to your question to us, is that this kind of misunderstood chapter of KM3 should be enforced by today. I think, yes, we need a complete other way of designing, which is not based on intuition, not based on the artistic, but is based on networking, on using, as Enrique as well was explaining, the best of everybody. And to mobilize, especially that in these days of credit crisis and other crises, to do that more strongly. So this was one of the posters that some of the Yale students made at that moment to campaign that in a country, in the US, where such a tradition has ceased to exist, that we all can become city makers. It was a love affair with younger generation. It was an action about, say, trying to see architecture and urbanism as a collective tool of participation and influence. And a dream to make a kind of environment where you could directly change your environment, your city, your architecture, your etc. And to love change, therefore, and to dedicate at that moment all my energy to change. We did some tools, as I explained before, to activate that momentum. The function mixer was and is about that, and here you can see it takes time to develop it. It was, as for instance this one showed, that everything could be parameterized, even taste, even democracy, even intuition, and even, one could say, ideology. And that it's simply a matter of it's challenging ourselves to go into the knowledge behind that kind of words in order to make that then indeed accessible for a wider audience. So here a simple example, just a block of 100 houses and 100 offices and 100 say gardens, and what you make when you, this is what the software did, hyperdiversity. This was Herman Hertzberger, avant la lettre, or say finally digitized. We need to do that just before he dies. And he's what would it look how it, you add then construction cost, add the light parameters to it, the whole block sort out, add even noise contours, and that would be then architecture at that moment. We are applying it currently, as you might have heard, that MVRDV is working very strongly on Almere, and that will come out in the end of May and in October with a bigger manifestation. And one of the elements is because the Elderman's hobby is basically there to give the architecture to the people, is on the edge of populism, I know, and I'll come back to that, is to make one environment which is based on this. So this is one of the studies that comes out of how that new neighborhood could look like, how it will show to the A6 motorway, and how we simply want to add a software package made by some of you to turn it into architecture. So this always frightens people. Your question, you start with the user, has an edge. At a certain moment, is this then architecture? Is this all there is? Yes, it is. And actually it's good, because it's so unexpected what has been made, that whatever materialization is added to it, it doesn't matter anymore. You have already the most mixed environment thinkable at that moment. And secondly, I think we should not be afraid of all these kind of zones. What it says is that we have to hook up with software engineers, with the technicians that surround our environments. And we know that, say, climate engineers are now more reigning our domain than architects. We become almost victims of those engineers, that we, in a way, we have to model it and to have to accept it and to turn it into a kind of device. And we went on with that, on a larger scale. I'm not going to show that, and with very, say, contemporary items as the climate change in this climatizer. But what this was one of the quotes that came from some of the discussions, is that indeed some deregulation is going on. A nice contradiction between if you want to work on participation, if you want on users, at the same moment there is a shift, there's a deregulation going on in architecture. So, okay, let's accept it. Let's go on to it. Of course, this was one of your main references as an organization to talk about Tonic and to talk about this main building. And actually, this is the smallest example of of private participation and user participation that I can imagine. We made this, 6 years ago, something like that. At the moment of Super Dutch, we painted the thing orange. And therefore, as we're now taken over in another place. So, because, and why we did it? Because it's a very simple building. There's nothing to do yet with the whole model that I'm going to develop later in the lecture. This was the simplest cube thinkable, but by only painting it orange, it became like an advertisement. And in what way? It was as if hell started after we painted that and revealed this structure. These neighbors started to complain, then that one, then the other one in the other room. The whole Volkskrant, the kind of local newspaper here in the Netherlands, came and they started to make a big fuss out of it. And the leader of the campaign against this building was actually one of our stand-up comedians and, in the Netherlands who brought it to a moment of a kind of show on the Netherlands and started to blame us that architecture was the worst he had ever met in life. That how can someone paint in front of you a building orange so that any image that he has in his room turns into an orange picture himself because of the reflection. So I thought this was quite nice that it happened. That suddenly when people started to use it in campaigns, that architecture was moving somewhere. We were sometimes so, when that's the risk of participation and user-friendliness and all these things that you're talking, at a certain moment it melts down into the unspectacular. And I know your generation is partly highly interested in happy brick, as I discussed it the last time in INDESEM. And like it's small things that are beautiful, but modest. Sometimes we have to move. Sometimes we have to push things. Where can we still push things in our society in these moments that everyone is already over-pushed unconcernedly? That I think is intriguing. Where are the niches? Where are this? And I say it because this pushing act is needed sometimes to talk about larger issues. I'm aware this is not a big issue, this large thing. But it was, because it was simply, it was a tool. It was a user-friendly tool. Because my client was an office, and that you know very well, who didn't have, how can I say that, a permission to live in this building. So they said, the hypothesis was there, how can we get that permission? The architecture has helped, and that's the backside of the story. Can you see it at that moment? Fantastic Google Earth picture we have made, and bang, this is what happened. So, this is during the act of transformation. The action group became so strong. In the meantime, we had our building permission, so they couldn't do anything about it. The media were so pro and against, and the stand-up comedian was gaining terrain. It was one moment I remember at an opening of a restaurant we made in Amstelveen in Amsterdam, that he came to me and always started to push me over the table and start to spit because on me. I mean, so emotional was it that in the end, in court, and it was agreed that okay, we changed the color. Fine, let's do. And then, of course, the architect has the right to make the color. So I said, okay, it will be army. Some of you might be this kind of trousers, this kind of army camouflage. So to show that we want to draw back. Then the next comic show on the television was there, and the stand-up comedian said, this architect is like so ironic. We cannot. Hey, stand-up comedian that's complaining about irony that I never heard before in my life. I thought irony is one way to survive in times of, say, recession and fear. So, okay, fine, no camouflage color because we are too ironic. We touch you in your very heart of your comic experience. So you choose the color, fine. But the only thing, and then my client came, he on the back of me, he said, in the court case, okay, but maybe we can negotiate now that we get the building, that we now have the permit to live. So that was what happened. They got the color, and our client got now the living permission for this house. Very user-friendly, no? The ultimate user-friendliness I could give from that to that. This is not a Photoshop. This is random. Okay, next example. Now I go a little bit deeper about participation, and this is another client. He became he's most of like the icon of the Dutch greediness in society of the last years, the former director of ABN AMRO, and he wanted to have a castle. So, fine, why do someone like them ask us to make a castle? That's already, and how to deal with that. So the castle had to be somewhere in the middle of the Netherlands, in the middle of the forest, and with a lot of negotiation techniques going on. So then the environment said, okay, castle fine, but it has to have a contour line like all the castles there. with chimneys are over it. So, oh my God, this is, we are very friendly to the environment, so what shall we do then? What can we do? So we built a cage, and we said, but the taste of the client was very specific, Reader's Digest, and how to, with a lot of armory stuff and that kind of thing. So how can we then deal with that? We said, okay, I don't touch your rooms. Your rooms are completely for you, for your grandmother who's living there, for some of the personnel that live. They all have their rooms. And the interior, it's fine. It can be black, purple, whatever. I do the exterior of the rooms. Yeah, but we don't have exterior because it's like they're connected. No. I make the space between the rooms a little bit bigger. And that's what happened in this drawing. And then we start to talk what to do. So we had a process like the function mixer, where has grandmother to be positioned, where the lady, where the fireplace, where the lift. Okay, you mix it, but 2 meters difference, that's all. And you can decide the facade of every room in that way. So that's what happened. Here you see pictures of the different pieces of the house. I'm not allowed to show it very in detail. And then the facade started to add. And what you then suddenly have is in this frame, this Frankenstein frame, you have suddenly these kind of blocks appearing with the voice of grandmother, the voice of the library, the voice of the maids. They all have their participation element, and the in-between becomes then pong. There it is. You can open the door. Well, it's actually not. It's only a frame. And you enter, and you. The other thing I said, of course, all the doors should be the same as your material. So whenever you choose brick you get the doors as well to be complete. And beautiful doors, by the way. Interiors, not designed. Beautiful, the interiors. And then the in-between becomes the space. And one can start to walk from the bottom to the top, passing by the different elements and always being surrounded. It becomes like a mini village at that moment. And the nice thing is, because with their own interior windows, so when grandmother opens the window, I want to have food. And you can walk, she can shout it downstairs and she will be served. So it's like in Sir John Sloane's museum in London, whenever there's a double wall, even the sounds drip down to everywhere, and there the collective starts. And then it becomes maybe a reinterpretation of a house, of an estate, of a manor, and more than only a collection of rooms. The collection in itself becomes the element. And one could say this was the first, function mixer that we made. At the same moment we were working in Paris. And I love Paris. And it's, by whatever means, currently we do much more in France than in any place in the rest of Europe, because maybe of that love affair. I love it because it has so much history. It has, in a positive way. And it's not like, oh, I love old cute houses or I love French food. No, urbanism has been tested there on the edge of experimentalism. Yes, the new towns are not good, I know, but they made it. And I think we should do that and think about it. So this is one of the projects that I love, Under the Seine, which I am now suggesting for Grand Paris, partly, and you will see in this, but was suggested as well for Les Halles, the center part that was cut down. I found it very courageous to open the city there and to turn it into the new infrastructure crossing point. And I show it because it will be, and the coming discussion will be about Forum Les Halles again. Then they made, because the people started to complain, this is not old Paris, what do we do? Okay, we make green over it. They greenwashed it and put these trees over it. Horrible. I mean, it was like, suddenly it became like a tomb of the beauty downstairs, of this courage to have an address from the periphery, from the banlieue into the center. That is what Les Halles is about, this great access. And it's one of the biggest, say, visited centers in Europe, or it's the heart of Paris. I mean, better than all these other places of the Eiffel Tower or even of Euro Disney at that way. And if you look to Paris, what Les Halles really the problem is, then it's actually, this is the catacombs of Paris. And you compare it to Waterloo Station, and immediately you know the problem. So that you can see in this slide, how can find a way, it's terrible. So we suggested and suggest to make a new kind of central Grand Gare for Paris. And which is kind of part of this kind of stupidity in France or like say elitism. Paris has all this kind of TGVs, this big trains, they stop at Gare de Lyon, Gare de Montparnasse, Gare du Nord, Gare Saint-Lazare, bang. All trains from Europe end in Paris. Nothing goes further. And if you want to go from the one to the other, it takes. So this is insane. This is elitist. We have to make a Grand Gare in the center of Paris so that the trains can cross, you can come up at a central place, and from there distribute it. So this was aimed to open up the site with this Grand Gare Centrale. Yes, I'm not going into it. And how to do that. So, and this is not a grand projet. There's another tradition in those days, and still now we have learned from the grand projet, is that you cannot push it into the stomachs of people. You have to talk with them and to get a collective spirit. That's why I love urbanism. I think it's an issue where you can share things. So when we showed the plan to all the entrepreneurs, all the people that are working there, they said, what do you want to do? And they say, don't touch that, don't do this, don't do that. Everything was not. We have a culture of no-ness. And that's, so how to put that again into yes-ness was that kind of issue. So we said, okay, fine. For everyone, you get your, like in the villa I just showed, you make your perfect kingdom. So the Bibliothèque La Fontaine, oui, fantastic, in gold, no problem, you make it in gold. Or the swimming pool wants to have light, yes, fantastic, great light. And then it becomes nice, because if everyone has his kingdom, then what we could do is, instead of these tombs, we could start to emerge and to show that project to the world. Like a vitrail, like in the churches of Paris. It's suddenly everyone has a window, but not to the neighbors, because you hate your neighbors. You don't want to be next to the H&M, because that's his stuff. And so no, let's make a window to the top, and suddenly, hey, then you're in Paris again, like a new dancing floor, which would be like the place for this young generation of tattoos and of t-shirts that are basically there. It's not Rue de Rivoli, it's not. So that suddenly have a space which is completely different than from the Jardin de Luxembourg or from the others. So here you see, how can we do that then? So the navel of Paris, somewhere in there it is there. That's the center of Europe, as it is, as they think. Okay, let's make it. So this is all the stuff, and let's kill now the places that you want to make better. Eh? Because of terrorism, you want to open the halls, you want to make better connections, use the space around the pools, or open up where it's possible, in between those shops, in between those elements. And what happens then you redistribute that program and make a new roof. That's what you see happening here. Some of the pools get another place, the two shops get a place like this, and turn it then into glass, and replant the trees exactly as they were in that way. You cover it again with a floating sea of trees, and then you walk around. And whatever you see, it's glass. That's the only discussion I gave. Glass does everything, and it visualizes the richness as like a grand parlor, where everything is happening under this kind of floating forest, and would lead then to this kind of plaza in that way. This where you feel, and here with terrorism, in a way has been, say, responded with vulnerability, with glass. And when it's with the light from below, it suddenly becomes yes. It shows the dance floor of Paris, and it turns it into the depth is now shown. And that's for me. Third exercise. Vienna. Now on the table, how on the other side of the city, in this spot, we are asked to make a new slab. There, fine. Yeah, what can you do with the slab? So these are the houses. This is it's Viennese law. It's very strong. It's stronger than Austria. Is much more classic and traditional than the Netherlands or than Denmark or any place in Europe in a way. You can see that on. I mean, they killed almost Zaha's building. So if this is, what can you give to all the same houses? So we said we give them an extra window, a bay window. For this, what would be the best in a way? To push the window on the both and the back and the front, but then how to deal with that? How to ask the different people and how to deal with that with say, in the case with finance. So with all these new windows, something goes wrong. Here you see the different plans emerging from that, and we have to control that, how that shifting act can be done, and turning into this kind of exercise with all this kind of windows that can be there. afford that specific social housing costs of Vienna. So, oops, it doesn't work. So then the client said, well, this is nice, but in a way I want to have something different. Here I don't cause enough difference with it. I hope that there was the film in it of the software that was like showing this shuffle, but it's unfortunately not there. So we were asked at that moment to do another variant, which was much more, and I like that actually, that's why I show it, honestly saying that initially you want to be too modest, and that we should be more ambitious, he said. And he said, I want to have more apartments and more different elements. So, and he looked to a project of us that we made in 1991 or something like that, 1992, in Berlin. So, this is what I like, he said, 260 different houses for 260 different people. Ooh, how to do that? So it took us a couple of nights and a lot of bottle of wine to make any difference, say, thinkable. And that's what you can see here in the different ways. So here a house simply with a view, that's a simple one. A white house, this I love one, the house with the terraces. You can see it, how it's translated, like an Indonesian sawah. Spaceship house. This one is a house especially for Wolf Pricks, because it's a Catholic house, and it's directed to his villa on top of the roof of one of his buildings. This is how it's developed, just in between, and how it's in plan. The cross house. This is a contemporary house, a bit Freudian, I know, a bit psycho. You surround your neighbor in this case, and very Austrian. And here's how it's developed, and how it's like a Corbusian. I mean, we wanted to improve Le Corbusier, which is actually not so complicated. You simply take l'unité d'habitation and you add, because there's one type, and you add the millions of types and you already win from him. So that's what we did. And then we started to make what it looked like. This I love, this series. This was a discussion, where to position all these elements. And we did it up till this kind of composition was reached. So here you see all the elements there. And how the Catholic house and the Sawah and the panorama house and the long house and the high house and the tower house are all positioned in this puzzle. And then they are translated into Austrian laws. Yes, it's minimum energy, of course, but that's not the problem. It costs you basically 50% of your glass, but that's what you do here. That's what the fences are fatter, and then you have it built during the day and during the night. Next exercise on participation and differentiation. In Copenhagen, we just won this competition on a spot. Of course, you're not allowed to build towers in Copenhagen because it's protected, but just around. So this is the spot on the white element in between cuteness, small villas everywhere, which is basically Denmark is about, endless sprawl of villas, and some kind of modernistic 60s houses. This is the place where one of the most famous architects has been living and building the most. So what can we contribute to that on this very spot, on that way? So what we said, we start with the village. We need to balance between the two. At the moment that we are not sure about program, because if there's what is clear these days is that if you build a house, it should be easily transformed into something else. And I like that what Soho has been doing in Beijing, that in a way we start to find a kind of European equivalent for that. So how can that then be? So if this is all the houses that we should make, then this would be the building. Not everyone has a terrace. The views are not excellent. So we started to work on that. And as a kind of mini software, how to update and improve all the elements for that. And to find out, say, the maximum, say, amount of terraces, outside spaces, in combination, say, based on the logic of the environment. Don't put blocks there because we want to have a view. Don't put it there because we need an entrance. Don't put it there because there's shadow, etc. Almost like behaving in a kind of American polite way. And that leads actually to, wow, a kind of, not bad. This is kind of dealing with the Chicago tradition, in a way. How can we turn, and it becomes like a vertical village. But what is most important, it gives conditions for different, say, interpretations per floor at the moment. They start to behave that you can put some proposed program, but when there is a stronger market for housing, it can easily adapt in that direction. Or a stronger market for offices, it can easily be adapted in that direction. So it's based on the common denominator, and that's, I think, always we have to find out what is the thing that we share between an office, so a certain size and certain height that can allow for that change and for that adaptability, as has been studied a lot, I think, in the past, could be then done. And that would lead to this kind of possibility. So here are some of the plans, and these are the housing units, how they can behave, and in different ways, and how they can together act as an office space or an in-between space, the same floor, how it can operate. So a column structure, a simple ducting structure, offices that are not, say, are completely dedicated to high performance on climatic levels, that leads to this potential building. Yes, you can live in it. Yes, you can make families in it. Yes, you have outside gardens. And yes, you have difference per floor that can deal with that tower. And that's maybe could become now, say, a tool for this momentum in time that spans the leap, we hope, between the small village and, say, the cuteness of Denmark and the ambition to become bigger in Europe. I end with an urbanistic enterprise. And I do that for a specific reason, in order to talk what the user can do. This is the landscape next to Shenzhen, just north, Kunming, where some of you might know it. It's quite nice. I mean, there's now a golf resort, and there's beautiful trees. It has one of the best lychees in the area. And what to do there? So this was the plan that was given in front of us. We normally do it like this. So, yeah, okay, that could be done, and it's very. But there is another kind of generation emerging. They said as well, a generation that wants to shop around and to be. So it's a very nice moment in time, I think, in China that could be encouraged the coming time even more. So they were referring to this kind of how to bring this kind of spirit in that project. That was the only question they asked to us. And so what we said, okay, when this is the terrain, the nicest thing would be if you could give to everybody what he wants. Okay, what would happen then? I'll make some houses here, make a block there, add something. Whoa, it's not bad. Looks like a kind of new urbanism in that way. And but how to do that? So because you can't do that completely, you need infrastructure, you need energy, you need, and we can do that per plot. That's what we try to do now in this case, in the following way. So first we start to, the existing is completely surrounded with an offset of 20 meters, so that any duct, any road can go through, and any tree can be planted over there for filtration. So that would be this beautiful greenerized word. Then we start with, you design your own plot in a way. And the plot always has an offset that you have to pay for 20 meters, which includes, again, the different sections that I described. And then you can do what you want on that plot. Green and bang, put it in. And this continues endlessly. And suddenly, you would have an urbanism which is not dictated by the idea of, say, sustainable structures that continue. No, we need, in a kind of new network society as well, not to be dictated by lanes or by kind of this obsession of certain kind of urbanists that you have to make lanes like this and that's it. No, this is the adventure. Here the lanes are like this. I drive through it, ooh, I have to go around this plot. And I go that direction. That's what I think could be even a more, say, evolutionary urbanism than I would expect it. And if you do that then on a large scale, then wow. You would have a complete, say, city of surprises. So we did this kind of simulations in different ways. And we are building for them a kind of small internet site that makes these designs possible. This will be you can bid directly through the internet, not through the planning bureau, but simply directly. I think it's nice. Why didn't we do that in the Netherlands? But why do we have to do that in China, for God's sake, and to do that? Do we need a kind of, say, revolution or evolution in that way to do it? So here you see the plots, you can select, opens the plot, you can draw your own, and it starts to calculate basically the bidding price, the ground price, with a certain kind of elements that you need to in it. How far should that go, is your question, in this kind of nuanced way. So how we ended this now halfway Shenzhen and Hong Kong, or should it continue all over the world, such a kind of pattern? That's an interesting, there are threshold issues in user-friendliness. That's the thing you have to discuss with each other. At what moment you have to have a more collective responsibility? Where is that? Do you translate that on the spot, as I tried to do it in the former slides? In this case, there was another element. That the horseshoe of the parallel to delta need a kind of, say, bigger green components as well in order to make it livable. So this is one of the perspectives to the mountains on this site. So what we then discussed is to change the plan and in a specific direction. And this is, say, the individualism we make. We open it up at one plot and give it a direction. So that's what you see here at on the site, how, say, this individualism is reaching the level of the end and turn it actually into this kind of urban plan where they all, it's basically one street that we design and the rest is undesigned. That will be taken now into account for this perspective. I end with a theoretical component. Done here, but I still want to show it, how participation can be worked at. We can model it in different ways. And I think the space fighter, as I presented partly in Venezia the last September, is about that. It is about change. And it is about, say, using evolutionary thinking to add that to our thoughts, how a city or how a building will behave in time. I think we have to model that. I think we can test that through our buildings, but I think as well it would be interesting to find an intellectual model for that. To model change, and it goes beyond the what-if section. It's easy. That scenario thinking is what we did the last 10, 20 years, which is still good, but if you do only what-if, you follow a specific trajectory. But if I ask you, what if I would do this, then you say, yes, but. So we have to make a model for after the what-if generation, which we call the yes, but machinery. And if you put any yes, but, if you are going to react on him, then you get suddenly an interesting chain of yes, buts. And how to think about it, how to model that. And so here how cities are changed already. Dubai in the past, Dubai now, Rome in the past, Rome now. So I think, so what we design is a platform that wants to work on different, say, games, in a better word. Gaming is a very, you know it partly, but I think Boston knows it much better than you do, about how we can use that science to understand a little bit of the chain of changes, of the chain of reactions, and of maybe, and that's what I hope to do with this platform, because we use different machines, tools, that we can find a tool that do in 1 minute all those possible chains of reactions and compare them and see what's the best. If you do that, then you have an advanced way, I would say, of thinking about the future. So it's modeled like this. It's under development. I mean, I have to do it with a little bit of money there and a little bit of money. Basically, I use a teaching model that there's 6 people, PhDers working in Boston on it, like half-time endlessly. I come up and down like once per 2 months, and we just work on it piece by piece. This is not teaching, this is developing in a way. And they work with students on the spot to get that step by step further. So it uses a pixelized Earth, basically a Google map, but then 3-dimensionalized. And it starts to add different, say, components to the program that is in that element. I will not explain it completely, how it's built up. You can zoom in this case. So, and then start to work on it. The pixels are, don't be scared about pixels. It's a new interpretation of structuralism, I know, and that's why, I don't know if Herman is in the audience, but it would be, here it's in a way, it's only a piece of information that starts to select what's the best neighbor you have to. And these definitions, that's what architects can model. Because you want to have more light, you want to have more experience, you want to have more unexperience or inexpectancies in it. All can be modeled in that way. For instance, one of the tools that we hang up on that is the chain of relationships between cities. Because Space Fighter, as it's called, fights not only within itself, but fights with a neighbor or with a neighbor on the other side of the globe. So if there is information in trade coming, then that has an effect on that specific node. So here, in that case, Dubai suddenly changes because of the so-called scarcity model in economical behavior into this kind of performance. Or in other kind of climatic models, it changes into this kind of performance. As we see now, it becomes a dead city as well. So with that kind of elements, with this kind of theoretical body that we did here, partly in Delft as well with PhDs, we went back to MIT and started to scribble down what could be, how to structure that information and how to structure that dream that we have been painting in this PowerPoint that I just showed some glimpses of it. So that led to this kind of, this element, the field that is changeable. Agents, we use simply the multi-agent model. I mean, you represent, for instance, a certain kind of group of people that want to talk about an ideological dream, and you find your customers, and that's basically how planning currently is working. It's not like driven by the state, but it's basically by agents that represent a certain kind of a desire that's taken on board, and they search for the best place. So we compared it with different games on what the good and the bad things were in Warhammer or in DEFCON. Quite a nice one actually. This one, I advise you to play on it. And we started to, I'm going through it, and we work now on this tool. And some of you have seen it, and how they start to, you can paint your terrain, get a grip of a piece of land, you gain money and agents to build up your program, towers grow on it, and it can be negotiated with the other agents and turn it then into, you see the agents running, trying to find the best spot. Here's the action, your initiative. Another actor starts to paint it blue. That attracts then the other agents. And then in the red zone, hey, there's a conflict. And that conflict is modeled in terms of kind of certain kind of optimizations. I'm going into it. And that's how it had to work. So here we tested it, and you see the 2.0 version of the films getting better. How it's now developing. Still a complicated game, not yet user-friendly, as you say it. But yes, it is a model to be back to what I dream about this kind of interactive relationship between architecture and its product. And maybe then I asked to give some answers to your questions. And I'm open for your remarks to that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your interesting views.
Are there questions?
Are there questions?
I hope it was fast enough. Yeah. It was not too slow and not too boring. Therefore.
Is it only for this game, or is it also applicable on architects?
It's a model, and a model is it's a thinking model, and how applicable will it then be? This last element, pieces, I think. That's what we hope to explore the coming year in like mini programs, one for IKEA, to how to design your best environment with your family, and to see how that then can be applied on such a kind of small level. So, I mean, software is like a giant motor, Rolls-Royce or Volkswagen motor, and you can only do a piece of it. So the last one shows about how fighting can be modeled, so negotiations between wider processes. But at the same moment, I mean, the zoomer, which I didn't show today, is not a piece. I mean, like Google made its power of 10 thing, but if you do that with information that is transforming, that already deserves its own time of thinking and development. So it's actually this whole component of elements is ultimately what is this dream about. And yes, then there are mini applications, there are bigger applications thinkable in that way.
Yeah, with this growing participation of the users of these projects, how do you see the role of the architect in the future then? Because that, in fact, is declining.
I think there is, I didn't talk about the information in it too much, and I think there's a lot of space, we are spatial specialists. So we know the consequences on certain elements. We can integrate it. We can see how far things should go and when it needs to reaches a certain kind of, say, threshold where you say no. That's why I showed Shenzhen, for instance. Or we can help to put in that information even per plot, per lot, per element, like in Shenzhen, which needs that extra information to make it possible. So the architect is, because of its spatial, his or her spatial awareness, can immediately translate that, this possibly done only by sociologists and technicians. They can add the spatial component to it and can initially maybe be only in, like a service provider, but can become, because of its more urbanistic and generic knowledge about it, can be as well the criticaster, the guy who's, or the girl that's criticizing it.
The sort of movie director, maybe you could also call it. You've got actors and one guy that is pulling the borders or pulling strings. Or
well, there is in the matrix, you have different, say, kind of people that do this machinery. And the architect of the matrix is basically, he's an architect, but he's indeed almost like an operational engineer at that moment. And I will not plead for a complete technocratic direction. I tease you in that way a little bit, because it's, although I think, but your question that you want to have a technocratic suggestion anyway for this conflict, that that for me it's in a way more interesting to go with the flow of the technocratic solution for the moment than to follow the one that's about intuition and the artistic. And why do I do that? Because I think there are not enough architects that are in this camp, and there are too many, and especially too many Pritzker Prize winners in that camp. So there's so that seemingly this zone is neglected because of this. What you would say as well, that they believe in this artistic zone as the purest role of the architect, and I want to discuss that. I'm not sure what it is. I want to compare it. I want to have maybe products, and that's why I love to see this Almere neighborhood where, okay, maybe it's worse than the intuitive architects, but maybe it's actually much more revealing and rich than they have ever done. Any one question?
I was wondering, because if you talk about experience, what is also really nice, and also like old cities, is the unexpected or the surprising effect or the contrast. And as you were explaining the models, it's possible that I don't quite understand. It's like based on a perfect ideal scheme where you have the perfect neighbors and it's you take in the context and it perfectly fits. Does this program also have space for unsurprised things, or sometimes out of things that are not well programmed and exist very nice?
Okay. Yeah, that's why I showed the function mixer as a first start, which was based on optimization, a model from 96, 97, done by Raphael Seidel, and then applied, say, up to 2004, I think, and afterwards you see the more evolutionary techniques happen. So then there's a platform, basically, where an unknown user, as you see in different games as well, is suddenly interacting with you. So yes, and at that moment, you don't know his description on his optimal settings. So already he or she is making other kind of pixels that have other kind of characters and other kind of descriptions than you are doing. So yes, I don't know how that will match. And that's what, that I think that's already explaining unexpectancy. Second thing, I have to say that in time, there will be always evaluation tools that like hackers are always hacking codes. So there will be always the next, say, level coming up that literally that will then emerge between you and this unexpected intruder in that way. So our knowledge about unexpectancy will increase in time. It's very abstract, I know. On the other hand, I think, in order to go back to your question, it mirrors a little bit how we can stage architecture, how we can think about architecture, and start to deepen our knowledge. And that's what I learn so much about these game designers with their direct way of answering this kind of questions. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, wait a minute.
I was wondering, how do you see this type of building with the whole criticism that there's no style in postmodernistic architecture? Or is this type of element building, is that the style in itself?
I've never thought about that. Style, what is style?
Well, I don't know, but the general criticism that modern, postmodernistic building lacks a style, so similar materials, similar decoration. This is very economic, very logical. And,
well, let's first start with the word postmodernism, because that's there are different definitions about it. And in thinking, postmodernism is actually a very good word, thinking and deepening an epoch of modernism and turning it to combine it more with the individual again. And beyond, say that the top down is going to be with bottom up again. That's what postmodernism in thinking, in philosophy says. Then Charles Jencks started to talk about postmodernism in architecture and confused it a little bit. Because what you maybe refer to is that postmodernism is this kind of collage of styles that has maybe no character as such. And no, so in that way, I think that's why I introduced the word threshold. At a certain moment, things become blurry or becomes not effective on a larger scale. Simply the opening act in Shenzhen is symbolic about that, to give it a larger perspective. That you can do as well with an individualized building. At a certain moment, it becomes only a blur, it becomes not clear, it loses qualities on another kind of level. And what are those qualities? I think in that way, when our Copenhagen building by coincidence got this kind of rocky experience, or this kind of Christmas tree experience, and everyone started to talk about that, then we reached a level that it becomes characterful. And that's maybe that's what you say is style, or is and the characterfulness or the characterness is needed in order to give it a wider meaning, give it recognition, give it so more people can give it a name, therefore, and it means something. It means, namely, it says something why it has become like that. So, what it wants to say is therefore a certain critique on the iconic building, as it's because we love iconic buildings. I love them. I think it's very good that iconic buildings are there, that there's still a need for it, but we have to give it criteria. What is a good iconic building? One, when it means something, when it's not replaceable maybe, and it's at another place, or when it becomes characteristic for a lot of people, or for, say, kind of direction in architecture. So that's what one could say at that moment, what you could add maybe to escape from the blurriness, the stylelessness, as you may be saying, in that way. Would it leave space for private interpretation, say from the blubbers in this generation? I don't know. at one moment I had to work in a plan for Zaha in Beijing, and in urban plan of her, which was impossible to work in, because it was everything was dictated like this, and what could we do? So the only thing what we did at that moment, to make it characterful, to make a point of resistance, where you make the building, give the shape out of your computer or your CAD drawings, give it to us, and we only add balconies. And you get a cactus at that moment. So, and she was like, "Oh, a good answer. We can do it." So then it becomes again an act of resistance. So no, I'm not against reactions as such. And I think this kind of element that I show here is a way of interpreting. And there are other people that interpret parametric design in another way. And somewhere we will meet. I don't know where yet, the coming years. But that's to give more space, as what you say, to the individual style, the individual operation as such. Good question. So I'm looking forward to that debate. Yes? That's another lecture. Honestly, no. I mean, this is not a joke. I mean, this is a method, and I understand your question. But I definitely think, and I think what we try to do here in the Y Factory will be about future cities, and will be about only fantasizing about future. And I'm pretty optimistic in that way. And this is only one tool to understand. I cannot say already what is the future. I can only think about possible futures, and I can embrace and love the unexpectancy that's in it. I can embrace and love the desire to know more about that. And I can embrace and love the sci-fi writers that are the only ones in these days that can have that fantasize about it. So, but it deserves more time than only talking now about it. Okay, thank you very much. I now give the floor to Enrique, who needs proper timing and the same questions. And good luck with your workshop the coming days.